It's This Week in X for Excalibur number 22, dealing with some of the ramifications of X of Swords, including an exploration of Merlin's S&M dungeon. Stay tuned for our full discussion. Welcome to This Week in X for Excalibur number 22. It was out on the 14th of July, 2021. We're going to get into a full discussion of this issue, also share our initial opinions, and of course, that is going to contain spoilers for this book, for other books, certainly for X of Swords. But for Excalibur number 22, let's just start out with our initial reactions to the issue, and that will begin with Tyler's initial reaction.
This is the Excalibur that I was expecting after X of Swords, because, you know, all the things that were introduced in X of Swords were kind of explored here. And in some ways, I can understand why they had to wait until after Hellfire Gala. But I mean, in some ways, well, the other thing is, I think I'm really fully on the Marcus Toll ship right now, because he did a lot of things in this book, which I thought was like really, really amazing. Not too splashy, but you know, I mean, he covered a wide range of terrain. He covered, you know, a lot of different expressions. So I thought this is really a good Excalibur issue.
Fariha, what about you? What did you think about this Excalibur issue?
So I feel like this is like issue 1 of Excalibur. I mean, you know, all the other 21 issue, I don't know what was their point. Other than X of Swords, okay, that makes sense. But all the other things that was kind of set up, it felt like it was, especially the issue right after X of Swords, where like we're going to go find Betsy, and then that didn't go anywhere. Then there was the Melis issue, which was really good. But then last Hellfire Gala issue, I don't know what that was about, because it felt like 8 different books were squished into one issue. So this is like back in form in a lot of ways, but feels like I'm kind of have PTSD about like, oh, it was back in form after X of Sword and then we dropped off. So I don't know where we're going to go with this, but everything to do with Pete Wisdom is like chef's kiss. I'm a huge fan of Pete Wisdom. I know of him from like Captain Britain and MI13.
A fantastic comic book. It's a serious recommendation of the team here.
It's serious. I mean, I love it. And then also Wisdom's, like there is a 6-issue miniseries called Wisdom.
I happen to have it right here, just by coincidence. Look at that.
There we go. That one. Like,
not on Marvel Unlimited, because it's Max, folks.
Max. Ooh,
it's dirty.
Because you know, Pete does some weird stuff to fairies in that. But the thing is, like, it's like I love him, and the fact the character, like I was like when in issue 21 he was kid. So, but I'm so happy to see that he may be a permanent feature of the team, you know, or maybe he will get his own strike team book. I don't know, but the thing is, like, that really got me very excited. And I'm also kind of beginning to think that, you know, the team is kind of forming in a better way now that Rogue has left. Like it's coming together. But then again, I'm just kind of too scared, because I'm like, well, okay, it's great first issue of the arc, which Howard has proven again and again that she can do, but then where it will go. So I am eternally optimistic, and, you know, I'm super excited, but at the same time, also cautiously super excited.
Now we're going to get a comment from our remote correspondent this week, Harry. Harry, what did you have to say about this issue?
This is Harry, here to talk about the new Excalibur issue while I'm standing at a dock. I loved this issue. I was blown away by how much I like this book, because it's a book I don't usually have strong feelings on. And every time I buy it, I'm hoping that this is the time I get really into it and I start really enjoying Excalibur. And for once, I did. It turns out that if you just have a really fun adventure in one of the Otherworld realms with some interesting developments with Saturnyne, that you can have a great book. There's a scene where they steal a train and they're super stoked about it and they're smiling, and I was smiling because it was such a fun issue. I really, really hope that this can continue. Teenie Howard's having one heck of a week, because these comics have been great from her. So I'm giving this book a 4.25 train heists out of 5.
I've been saying for a while now that I want to like this book so much, but it just feels like the cast has no place here. Like, it just feels like Betsy shows up and does some stuff and everybody else just stands around. This really felt like finally a book where everybody was in it for a reason. They had a little bit of forward motion each. Their lines couldn't have come from other characters. And it made me go back and appreciate old Excalibur more. I happen to be in the middle of reading the Cross Time Caper right now in our household read. And when you look at it, it's not like the team is so British. Like, it's Captain Britain and Meghan are British, and they have Alexander Stewart with them. But, you know, Kitty, Rachel, Nightcrawler, they're not part of this British idiom, but they're reacting to the idea of magic. They're reacting to the idea of the mythology of the British Isles, to the amount of nationalism that can sometimes come with that. And it's fun. And the whole point of it is that it's fun, and it's kind of like making, at its best moments, making light of all of those things, of all of that mythology and all of that history. And I feel like this issue just felt like that to me. It just had the magic. I don't think it's just because of Pete Wisdom. I don't think it's just because Gambit actually felt useful for once. I don't think it's just because the Saturnyne and Merlin scene was amazing, as was the Saturnyne and Betsy scene. I just think all of those things all together made it feel like not only it had the spirit of classic Excalibur and Captain Britain, but this is a book with a reason to exist. And I'm rooting for every book every week. I always want every comic book to be good, though I sometimes might not give that impression. And when I closed this book digitally, I just said, this was great. This is all I'm looking for. If it can maintain this level of quality, I will be happy every month, and I will get to be a cheerleader for Excalibur, which is historically my favorite X-Men comic book, usually. So I know it's got added pressure on it, but this is all it takes for me to be a cheerleader, an issue this good, because I think it was good.
And so the thing is, like, I've always, a little digression, but the thing is, like, I always kind of thought of Excalibur as like what Thor, the world of Thor is to Norse mythology in Marvel world.
Yeah.
Excalibur is that for British lore but all these issues, it never felt that way. The way Captain Britain and MI13 and then Wisdom felt, like, you know, so, but I feel like it's kind of coming back to it. And I hope that, you know, like, it keeps up. Is Teenie Howard British?
No.
Oh, maybe that's the problem. But anyway. I'm telling you, it's not a knock on her. I have not seen a single British thing written by non-British people to be good. Like, it just doesn't work. Like, there is a certain Britishness that they understand that, you know, it's hard to come by.
And I was reading an interesting thing. It might have been on Twitter from the Claremont run, who does really great academic discussions of Claremont, but saying that as British as the original Excalibur was, Claremont only lived in Britain until he was, I think, 3. Like, he moved, and then Alan Davis is British, but he's not like a Londoner British person. He lives like way out in the sticks. So of course he's exposed to British culture, but he's not like part of the kind of like downtown, very urban version of British culture. So even the original Excalibur, these were two people who had access to Britishisms and certainly were, you know, British and Anglophiles on top of being British, but they were not bringing this kind of very common downtown urban London or Liverpool or some other big market Britishness to it. They're bringing in almost an outsider view of Britishness. And that's part of what makes that original Excalibur so, so charming. And as soon as I read that, I was like, yes, like, that is why I always felt it charming. And so I kind of agree, like, it's hard, even if you're the hugest Anglophile on the earth and you love consuming British media, I don't know if you can get to that unless you actually have a real connection to Britishness. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I welcome anyone to read any John Constantine written by non-British people and die a little inside. Like, it's not good. It's not good.
And that's why people like Paul Cornell and Simon Spurrier have been so good on these kinds of characters and teams, even if they haven't explicitly written Excalibur, because it's got a certain feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's not use that as an excuse to dislike this issue, because actually this really hit for us, and
this is a good.
This really did. So we're going to do our brand new and already much beloved format here, which is called Bring Your Own Point, because in this issue that only a certain amount of setups, rather than go through it sequentially, we're just going to talk about the things people really are dying to talk about, and we're going to start with Fariha. So Fariha, what did you bring to us today that you are dying to talk about from Excalibur number 22?
So I'm bringing to you Marvel's John Constantine, Pete Wisdom. It's no, like, it's not even, it's such a like weird ripoff. Like it's kind of hilarious in a way, but it's okay, you know. I absolutely love this character, and obviously other than any British writer picking him up, he usually not used a lot. So I
almost feel
very
like the American writers like don't fully get him. So when they have the chance to use them, they're like, well, I'm not going to use Pete Wisdom because I don't really get it.
Yeah, I mean, and then I think it's also because of the connection with Constantine. Like he's very much in the same characteristics. Like, you know, and then he also deals with the same world of demons and Otherworld and this kind of thing that he does. The only thing is like he's not a man whore like Constantine is. So that's like the only thing. But which is not a bad thing. That's sex positivity. But the thing is like, so I was very excited to see it. And I was also very excited to see how he reacted when he's told that he cannot be in the United Kingdom anymore. He is like through and through a British person. Like he is British before he is mutant. He's British before he is even a human. Like that's his thing. Like he's like so ingrained in that, and he dedicated his entire life to protect the country. Like he's always like, he has this certain nationalism that is not like necessarily a bad thing. Like it's like a very, you know, in a cool way, and to have that taken away from him for an identity that he doesn't necessarily care about that much. Like because he never actually I'm a mutant. It never been a thing. I mean, we've seen it before when someone tried to welcome him. He's like, get away from me. Like, you know, he was kind of anti-Krakoa and everything. And now he's stuck in this island and there's nothing he can do about it. And then the thing is like seeing his like depression kind of in a silent, like, you know, credit to Marcus Toe to kind of bring that.
Yeah, he really brought out the emotional beats with some great page layouts, kind of showing him in the same place as everything's moving around him, which is a very good way to kind of show that kind of depressive malaise on the page, which is that you remain the same no matter what the stimulation around you is.
Right. And I'm kind of also excited to see that this one place where there's all these pictures that were hanging and people were like looking through that. I'm like, is that a memoriam for like mutants who haven't come back yet? But that was like such a cool idea. And then the thing is, he looks at that and he's like, yep, I need this for back, you know. I personally don't recognize these characters. I'm pretty sure they're probably in Wisdom or in MI13.
It's a deep cut. It's like,
I don't
deeper than that.
I think.
Yeah, right. Like, you know,
one issue actually.
Oh, okay. So one issue people that are brought back, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to do something about it. So it's like everything about this was so on point with Pete Wisdom, and I'm glad that it's not. For some reason, I actually went back to read 21 because I thought that they will never know he died, right? You know. So, but the thing is, like, I was just kind of so broken by his reaction to that he can never go back to the land he loved, and which had such an implication. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know what I would do if someone tells me I can't never go back to Canada. I mean, which is something that happened last year because of COVID. Like, you know, you can't travel and everything. I know that, and I didn't even serve for the country of Canada like he did. So I can't even imagine what he must be feeling. So everything about that was on point. I loved it so much. And I really hope that it continues on. And maybe, like, you know, we have a mini series out of it.
Which I think you bring out. I mean, you bring out a point which I kind of don't quite, which is like, you know, which is a problem, I think, with Howard's Excalibur. There are certain things which is always not mentioned. Like, how do they know Wisdom died?
Because he yelled at her, yelled at
Betsy. He yelled for help.
Yeah, he yelled for Betsy's hand, and it cut off. So obviously she went looking for him, like, you know. Yeah, but I mean, that's how
that he died.
Because he told her where he was. He gave the location. Like, I think like there was like a whole conversation between the two.
Yeah.
And
I see Tyler's point though, that it's like an X Factor thing. Like, they can't really know if he's dead. And he's not a member of X-Force where they get these like priority resurrections the way that X-Force, they're like, Quentin's probably dead, bring him back. And so it's like a little bit of a hole, but I do think, to Fariha's point, they did enough with him being, and they know these people are virulently anti-mutant enough that him saying they're killing me and being cut off was probably thought to be enough of a hint.
And the other thing is like in one of the earlier issues, Megan was actually one of the priestess in disguise. She was an undercover. So she might have gone in and figured out that they actually sacrificed him.
I totally missed that.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that... The other thing which I thought was interesting is that Alison Dubber is a clairvoyant.
But not a precog.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's kind of a thin line between precog and clairvoyant, right?
Should have asked Mama Moira what she was asking. She's not gonna be happy about that. Moira will take care of her.
Well, I have so much I want to latch onto on this one, to the point that it was maybe almost my bring your own point, but I have something else I want to talk about too. So clearly, we always talk about this as immigrant chat, especially when it's the three of us. And I think we've all had that feeling in the last year. Like, it's now been to the point as of, I think, 2 weeks from now, that my daughter will have been more in New Zealand in her life than in the States. And she still hasn't been back for like half her life. And we were really going to go for a visit last year. Like, we were kind of finally putting it into gear. One of my best friend had a baby and we wanted to go see the baby. And then, COVID happened. And I know Tyler has mentioned recently too, that he's really feeling like it's been a long time since he's been back Singapore. So I think that this idea of being told like you can't go back to your nation, like it exists and it's there, you just can't go back, really probably hit for us in a way that it doesn't hit for some people, because we all have experienced that really hugely in the past year and in a clear and present way. So that really hit for me. But the other thing is these strike agents. So all 4 of these debuted in Daredevils, which is one of the Marvel UK comics that was running the serialized Captain Britain in the back of it by Alan Moore at that point and Alan Davis. But it also, in the front matter, I think was just reprinting American Daredevil from the Frank Miller run. And so it was a reprint book. And that's why it's kind of hard to find it to read even digitally, because they're not going to reproduce the reprinted material digitally. But that's what headlined the book. And that was on the cover of the book. But of course, it's all been reprinted in the Captain Britain Omnibus, and it'll be reprinted in this revised Captain Britain Omnibus Panini as trades. I mean, I have a whole guide. This is what I do. But the thing that's interesting is, to Tyler's point, most of them have only made one appearance in Daredevils, and they were not explicitly mutants. Teenie Howard has now decided in retrospect that they were mutants. But one of them, Alison Double, the the clairvoyant, made a few different appearances and definitely had a little bit of a relationship with Betsy, which actually makes that interesting too. But then I just so happened to go back and reread House of X #1, and Strike is one of the components of Orcus, which I think if you read the Orcus list, it's the one that I think at the time we were like, what's Strike? Because it's mostly this Captain Britain thing and it doesn't come up a lot. But there's a double entendre to Wisdom bringing them back and forming this counterinsurgency. It's not only about getting back at Britain, but if he knows anything about Orcus, it's also saying like, you were my trusted insiders. You would have never been the part of Strike that would, go to Orcus, because it turns out all 4 of you were mutants. So it's just really interesting, super smart, and honestly, such a small fraction of people will have ever read this continuity, and it's only one issue. It doesn't really matter from like a continuity nerd standpoint. It matters from a what good storytelling standpoint for Teenie Howard. And hey, now we know why they're reprinting that Captain Britain Omnibus. Marvel always has a reason. People are going to buy that $125 book for this one Daredevils issue so they can figure out who Strike is.
The interesting thing here is also, I have to admit something. I have never read any Shakespeare. But I noticed
complete works of Shakespeare. I read them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So do you?
Does that count as one
humor?
book or 30 something books?
It was one giant.
I know, but I know you have your constant mental database of how many books.
It counts as one because it's a matter
because it's one book.
Yeah, it was one book.
So do you recognize the humor here?
Oh no! I'm not like I'm not Kenneth Branagh. I just read it once, so I can tell people I've read it. So and read it, and I justifiably be like, this is not my thing. So
I think I do not know. I don't understand it. So I was like, oh wait, why are there colors attached to humor? It turns out that
Well, that's not
not-
exclusively Shakespeare, but
No, it's not.
It's Shakespearean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, Shakespeare used it as well, and then like these are like basically just 4 different qualities or 4 elements that in cosmology or in
Well, wasn't it also part of like
metaphor?
medicine, like medieval medicine?
medieval
The humors,
physiology.
it was like excrement and then like snot and blood, and they were the humors, right? So the 4 humors, actually they go back to Hippocratic medicine. So it goes all the way back to Greek medicine. And red is blood, yellow is bile, black is black bile, and phlegm is the last one, which I guess that they have made white, is white.
That's just gross.
And they're all associated with behaviors. So blood is associated with being enthusiastic and active. Yellow is associated with being ambitious.
Fire,
black
fury.
is associated with being melancholy, and white is associated with being reserved. So it's just another mutant machine. It's another kind of
that's what I was thinking
4 points of the compass. Yeah,
exactly. Because if you go back to the earlier, like I think probably issue 1 of Excalibur, they have that symbol where you have like 4 points, and then it forms an X, which is in the middle. So again, here we have this 4 points, and then that's put in an X here, which is kind of like a strike mark too.
Let's make the book about them then. Forget the other characters.
Well, I mean, I think that's really cool that we're like maybe gonna lean into the really kind of obscure Britishness of the Marvel Universe. They're also doing a Knights of Pendragon omnibus upcoming, and that is something that never gets referenced. It's actually the first time Marvel in the States have, I think, ever reprinted a Marvel UK book except for original Death's Head. So it's kind of like, what is going to make Knights of Pendragon relevant? Something's going to be coming. But let's go to the next Bring Your Own point at this point. So Tyler, what is your Bring Your Own point from this Excalibur issue?
I mean, like I said in my first intro, I mean, in the intro chat, the overview, I was looking forward to Excalibur exploring more of the other realms of Otherworld. And we do get a little bit of this here, where they were in Blackspoke and they were trying to see what is there. And we have this council meeting, which 2 council members are conspicuously missing.
Which 2?
And they are both Omega mutants.
Jasper and Mercado. Yeah.
Yep. So that was so interesting. I mean, of course, Avalon is there, and the I think there's War and Death. Oh no, Pestilence and War, and they are probably representative of Dredo, because they basically killed. I mean, I want to see more of this. I want to see more of the different realms, and they bring out. I mean, this issue brought up a pretty interesting point. Since when was Saturnyne the one that is in control? Because all we have seen up to this point, before Hawkspox, before Excalibur #1, is Merlin and Roma are the one in charge. So I'm really happy, looking forward to see where we go with this. And I mean, we all know that the X team works really closely, so I do enjoy the fact that they reference back to New Mutants, Danny and Shan going in first. Yeah, so I thought that was a nice touch. Like,
right, yeah, that was the whole point of it, like to reference it here.
Well, and also without being quite as explicit, the Sevalith ambassadors are uneasy because of about the state of affairs there. But if we track back to what's been happening in other books, I think New Mutants briefly stepped by Sevalith, right? When they were looking for Josh, that's where he winds up. And Wolverine dropped his vampire girlfriend off in Sevalith. So Sevalith being like, things are horrible for us. The unspoken there is because like mutants keep coming and dropping off their kittens at the farm here. Like, and I really, I had this moment of thinking we were kind of sour on some of X of Swords, But to us, it was because it couldn't decide tonally between the silliness and the seriousness, and if the sword fights were real or if they were goofy. We were never against this world building. And if you go back and watch what I think was the episode that we were the fullest on crazy about, it was the episode that introduced all of the different parts of Otherworld. I mean, we went through every single one and talked about it and what it means and what it represented. I think, to me, that's like my favorite memory of talking to y'all about X of Swords. So to see that back here and to see how easily each of the scenes of the ambassadors hit, because they spent such an amount of time defining them in X of Swords, I was like, this is what we were meant to get out of it all along. And you know what? Maybe all that other stuff just came from it being expanded because it was after the pandemic break. But like, if this is the thing that was supposed to be paid off, then great, because it paid off really well. It made the scene really hit. I was into the idea that Saturnyne is like, oh, Merlin, you're always talking. But Merlin's like, no, who's with me? Who's having a bad time? And the vampires are like, we're having a bad time. And it just like really, really worked. And it's hard to make a reader care about a whole council of stuff that just got invented out of thin air. But I was really invented. Of course, when they showed the two from Drydoor or Amenth or whatever we're calling it now, I was like, ooh, how are mom and dad doing on their second honeymoon? Do you have any news? Like, I just was so invested.
So you just took the words from my brain. And
second honeymoon?
Yeah, no, not the second honeymoon, but everything you said about like the world X of Swords and the world building. Because after reading this, I actually went back in Goodreads and increased X of Swords rating to 4 out of 5.
I went back and like reconsidered, like, are there things of X of Swords that I was too hard on at the time? Yeah.
Which I mean, I don't know how to kind of think about it. It's like, should a thing should be standing on its own, or I'm having to reevaluate based on what came after it, which I guess is a way to do that. I don't know. But the thing is, like, after reading that, I'm like, that was written so well, that I understood who these people are, what they are, what their characteristics, and why they're behaving the way they are behaving, which is which is a huge achievement. Like, I was all about it. So I actually increased the rating.
It also makes me think about something we talked about a lot at the time, which was this idea of Hickman and Howard are good for each other. Howard made Hickman feel more authentic voice-wise, and then Hickman made Howard's stuff feel bigger. And like, part of what's been really missing from the past few Excalibur issues really is it hasn't felt big. The scope has felt really contained. And that's great when she gets to do personal moments like the Malice issue, which I think is going to probably go down as one of our favorite issues of this whole year. But the other ones just lacked that like heft. And this is the first time that I read an Excalibur issue and I was like, there it is. There's that, the heaviness, the epicness, the bigness of why this is an X-Men, like one of the flagship X-Men books.
Yeah.
Right. No, agreed. I was all about this, but yeah.
Well, I think my bring your own point kind of crosses both of yours in a way, which is that this is an issue that remembers why the characters are there in the cast. And I think something that we didn't get into yet in the Otherworld Council meeting, because we're talking about the council itself, is Betsy. Just the Betsiness of Betsy. Like, she's there and she's like, look, I'm at this damn meeting because I am Captain Britain, like it or not. And I've got to pay attention to this stuff, like it or not. And then Saturnyne, to her credit, is like nasty to her. And she's like, but we do have to work together. And the scene just keeps getting like more and more interesting as it goes on, because Betsy's like, okay, well, thank you for bringing me in on this. And then Saturnayne's like, oh, how hard was it to say thank you, Betsy? And then Saturnyne is like, I might be willing to tell you what happened with Merlin, but you've got to do your Captain Britain job first before you can be in on this confidence. And again, because I'm reading Cross Time Caper, which has tons of different Saturnynes, I was just like, yes, like this is who these people are. This is why Betsy is different than Brian. And even with Brian being there, because he technically is, along with Jamie, with the representation of Avalon. Like, it just worked. But even deeper than that, Gambit finally has a reason to exist in this book. This is my true bring your own point. Gambit, at the beginning, Sheriff Whitechapel tries to assassinate him, and he like, I can't quite figure out, he interrupts the kinetic motion of the bullet and redirects it with his own kinetic potential. Basically, he swats it out of the air like a fly. I'm like,
basically just like pluck and like, I mean,
just,
with the card.
Yeah, right. And then also that he lifts the magical tarot cards from Saturnyne, and we know how crazy they are because we saw them in X of Swords, and he's using them as his deck of charged cards, but he's on exploding. They're having the effect of the tarot card. Like, yes, now there's a reason for Gambit to be here. Thank you. It took 22 issues.
And also his accent was on point.
Yeah, it was just like, good Gambit.
Dink, like.
What do you think about this show? I can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. No, take that back.
No,
Don't put that out there in the world.
We'll have my
But-
buddy Thomas on to do a real Cajun accent for us.
Yeah,
Oh.
but the thing is, like, it was there, and also I felt like I also know why Richter is there to break them out of stuff. Like,
And it
I
wasn't
don't
just
know,
Richter being like,
I
"Oh,
still don't
Blue
know why
Daddy,
Richter's
please
there.
come back and hold me in your big big blue arms." Like he actually.
You
He
know
had a
why
reason.
he wouldn't do that? Shatterstar is back.
Yeah.
He doesn't need Blue Daddy anymore. Like, you know.
But again, yeah, Richter felt like
he just needs,
he was there. He was kind of
he
like
just
rumbling in
needs
the
a
background,
daddy.
and he
That's
was like, "I can just make this all rumble. I can just break the earth." And they're like, "No, we're on a mission, Richter. Like, that felt like Richter." Jubilee, who had probably the least lines here, and she doesn't really use her powers, but her whole thing about like, of course we've got to free these people. Like, Jubilee, who was adopted and then escapes to the outback to herself. Jubilee, who was made into a vampire. Jubilee, who has an adopted child, who's like, "Oh well, he is not invited. We are not bringing him to this." It just felt like they were really them. And that's, I despite how nasty I seem about comics sometimes, I don't have a really high bar. I want a cool story and characters that feel like themselves, and Excalibur easily vaulted over the bar. And that's my bring your own point.
Yeah, I really hope that it stays this way.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and then the very last scene.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so this is the same Arthur as King Arthur?
Well,
King
they're
Arthur
supposed to
with
be the
Excalibur.
king of Avalon.
King.
Once and future crossover, everybody.
Yeah, well, that one is like insane, Arthur. Let's not bring him here.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, also the story of Arthur, King Arthur and the Round Table, is one of the first, I think. No, I mean, not necessarily the first, but I remember as a sentient being that I read, like a first fantasy I read,
Okay.
and it was like, because it ends with the version I read, and it was like a child, or like a abridged version, the one that I read, it kind of ends with a tragedy, and it was like a whole misunderstanding tragedy that like just broke my heart. So Lancelot, Round Table, Merlin, it holds such a space in my brain. And King Arthur, of course, so that I'm always kind of excited to see this. It's one of the reasons, despite Once and Future is kind of up and down in a thing, I am just still reading it.
Well, I mean,
it's mine.
It's also gorgeous,
thing.
like unbelievably gorgeous.
No. I've been reading it on my iPad. I almost licked my iPad a bunch of times. Almost.
I have to read it digital because I zoom in on the art so far that I think if I had a physical copy, I would be reading it with the book on my face, because I go in so close to zoom into the lines and the colors. And I mean, but Tamara Bonvillain the fact that she's not nominated and winning an Eisner this year for coloring for Once and Future is offensive. It is the best coloring, period.
I ordered a slipcase so fast, especially with the skull on the top. Oh, it's amazing. But anyway, so I'm kind of excited to see that, and I was also very sad to see Arthur. And if you were a fan of the Merlin TV show with the Arthur and Merlin shipper, you would be like, "This is not our Merlin and Arthur."
No, I did not watch that one because it looks pretty annoying to me.
Oh, it is the most cheesy. It's you like Doctor Who, so it's like that level of drama minus it's like, will they or won't they? But yes. You might run a lot back.
Before I forget, I mean, this whole Excalibur thing is also kind of, I mean, it also reminds me that Claremont really loves King Arthur and the story, because he always tries to insert that book called The Once and Future King by E.B.
Yeah, he always has people reading it.
Yeah, he has people
it's always
reading
dropped into the
on the
background
table.
of the scenes.
Yeah, so that, I mean, it just reminded me of a little bit of that too. So yeah.
Well, and the final thing that I would say about that final scene, I'm happy you brought it up because I kind of forgot about it since it was just one page, is we're really getting a story beat here about what is the essential Britishness and who owns that, right? Does this council of this clan Aqaba own it? That's anti-witch breed just because they're there and they have a history? Does Pete Wisdom own it because he wants to be modern and British and kind of take back the meaning of it? Does Saturnyne own it because she kind of owns the overall power of mythology right now and the rule of Otherworld, which is an essential component of Britishness because it's kind of like the fairy flip side of that? Or does Merlin own it because he's got King Arthur locked up, and King Arthur is the ultimate national symbol of Britishness, even above Captain Britain, right? And I'm sure you could find other shades of meaning, but that's I think why this really works for me, because it's now finally a comic book that bears the name rightfully, Excalibur. And that has been our discussion of Excalibur number 22. If you're looking for discussions of other X-Men comic books, guess what? We've got them all the way from the beginning of X of Swords to now. We have discussed every single issue. So if you're reading at home alone, if you're just catching up, tune in because you'll find it here on the channel. And Fariha, we've covered every X-Men issue since the beginning of X of Swords. Why?
Because X-Men is better when it's read together.
That is certainly true. And as fun as this one was to read by myself, I'm so happy I got to hear what everybody else got out of it as well. So on behalf of myself, Tyler, and Fariha, we want to thank you so much for being a part of This Week in X. And until we get to talk to you again, whether about X-Men or anything else, we very much hope that you are well.
Bye.